And with that, let me say welcome again. We're thrilled that you're interested in applying for SAGE's brand new Equity Innovation Lab Pilot Microgrant program. A little bit about SAGE. We are the country's largest national organization serving LGBTQ+ elders. We advocate, train, offer services, support, and guidance, and connect people across generations. As for me, my name is Elise Hernandez. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Director of Research and Impact with SAGE's new Center of Excellence. I lead our research collaborations, support our evaluation work, and our sexual orientation and gender identity data collection advocacy work. And of course, I coordinate this very exciting new microgrant that we are talking about today. So let's get right into it. Here's a roadmap for what the application tutorial is going to look like. I'll talk a little bit about the grant overall, provide some general guidance, preview the application, and then answer some questions. So what is the reason and the rationale for the Equity Innovation Lab? Well, SAGE is really invested in transferring power and resources to local Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities, trans, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people, and rural LGBTQ+ elder communities that are doing really critical and innovative work across the country. We recognize that at the local level, you are the experts on your own needs, your desires, and of course, what the solutions are to a lot of the challenges that you're facing. So more about the grant. This is a national grant that's a year long, and it's going to be supporting ongoing projects that are led by groups that are historically under-resourced. So folks who haven't had as much from some more formal help. And it's going to provide up to $5,000 in unrestricted funds. And SAGE is going to facilitate networking, technical assistance, community building, and of course, learning. And most importantly, this grant really is about prioritizing and centering by and for BIPOC, TGNC, and B, and rural LGBTQ+ elder communities. This program really is learning focused and not so much about were there results and was it effective, although of course we assume and imagine that it will be, but it really is about learning. And given that we are in a pilot year, we know that there are going to be issues and challenges, but we'll be listening, we'll be responding, and we'll be documenting everything and how it goes and the feedback that we get in order to improve the program for the next year and the year after that, and the year after that. All right, so on to some general guidance for the application. First, it's really, really critical to carefully review the eligibility criteria for the grant. It's not open to just anybody, and it's not for everybody. Your group and organization should have a small operating budget, if any at all, that is, of around $50,000 or less. Be a 501c3 or 4, that is a nonprofit, but also we're open to folks who don't have that official status and are more informal. But in that case, you will need a fiscal sponsorship from a nonprofit organization. You should be BIPOC, TGNC, and or rural older adult led. There should be some representation from these folks in the leadership and certainly in the communities that you serve. We are open and welcoming intergenerational projects, but those need to, again, make sure that older people are represented and a part of it in a meaningful way. You have to be proposing a project that has ongoing activities. Again, this is a year-long project, so it can't be for something that, say, is funding for your community to attend a fair or to put on a fair that's one time a year or to attend a conference. It really has to be a project that's about maintaining engagement with the community in an ongoing way. And of course, you'd have to be able to participate in virtual grantee meetings and gatherings that are going to happen throughout the year. Because it's learning focused, because it's really about community building, it's really important that you have the capacity, the bandwidth to be able to engage in these virtual grantee meetings, to get to know the other grantees, and to be able to connect and learn from one another. So it's really, really helpful for you to try to get all your materials ready by gathering them all in one place. So when we say materials, we mean first those things that describe your group or your organization. So that can be a strategic plan, an annual report, previous grant proposals that you've written, meeting notes that you have, a website, results from a community focus group or a survey that you've done, a charter, really anything that gives you a sense of how you're going to communicate who you are as an organization or a group. And of course, anything else that you want to share, make sure to get that material together as well. Also, you want to have a description of the specific project that you're proposing for this grant application. What are your goals? Who's the project going to reach? And what's it going to involve over the course of the year? And finally, thinking about a material that might help you talk about how the project fits in with your group or your organization's larger mission. You'll also want to get together two budgets, one that's going to be for your overall group or organization, and then one that's specific for the project. And if you don't have a budget or don't necessarily know how to put a budget together, no worries. We have provided some resources and a template for you to use in the application itself, which you'll see when we preview the application in just a second. Next, it's really, really important to preview the application itself. We've made a PDF of the application available for download on the second page of the application. So you can read through and think about all of the questions ahead of time with some spaciousness so that you can look back on them and draft your responses without being in a rush. Next, we suggest that you familiarize yourself with the scoring rubric so that you get a sense of what the selection panelists or the judges will be looking for in your applications. And just to give you a little bit of a preview of what those criteria are, scoring is going to be based on whether the project is addressing a critical need, whether it's bold and innovative, whether it's reaching far, that is a lot of people, or reaching deep, which means reaching few people, but with really intensive support and help, whether it's engaging the community meaningfully, and then also, of course, whether it's feasible. So is it something that is actually achievable given the time and resources that SAGE is offering, but also that's already available to you? Also, understand the priorities that SAGE has set for this microgrant. Again, this is a very specific grant that's meant to center multiply marginalized LGBTQ+ elders who haven't necessarily had a lot of access to resources in the past. So we're looking to fund 6 projects total that are in different areas of the country, that are led by and serving all across those priority groups that were mentioned, so BIPOC, TGNC, and rural folks, and that are working in different project areas like health and wellness and the arts and financial wellness, among others. We don't want to fund 6 projects that all look alike or that are all working in the same part of the country. We really want to spread the wealth quite literally. So make sure to take that into consideration when you're submitting your application. A pro tip here, we strongly suggest that you prepare answers in a separate place that you usually use, a Google Doc, a Word doc, for example, and make sure to save frequently and as often as you can. The internet can be a very unpredictable place and it has issues. We do not want you to lose any of your hard work on one of those glitches where your session times out or your internet goes. and all the answers that you've typed have disappeared. This is not an application where you can save and come back in the application itself. So please make sure that you do it separately. And then when you feel like your answers are in good shape, open the application and copy and paste those answers when you're almost ready to submit to make sure you don't lose any work. Finally, we've posted some resources on page 2. Some of those are grant writing tips, the budget templates that I mentioned, and some frequently asked questions about the grant. Click through those resources for some more guidance and some more reminders. And of course, let us know if there's a resource that you think would be helpful, but that we haven't listed. And then we can go and try to find that and post it on the website, not just for you, but for everyone else who's going to apply. Okay, well, before we preview the application itself, I wanted to point out a couple of things. First, we've offered up different ways to answer the questions. We know that not everyone feels they're most comfortable or they're most confident in terms of writing. So you can also record videos, you can record audio, or maybe there's a different way of answering the question that isn't audio, video, or written that you can think of that you want to answer the questions in. That's okay. We've offered alternatives where you can upload files to answer the questions. Writing style and the format that you choose to answer the questions will not be something that the judges score the application on. They're not going to take that into consideration. The answers really are going to be judged on the content of the ideas. That is the most important thing. So choose the format and the words that make the most sense for your group or organization, and that make the most sense for your project and what you're proposing. But whatever you choose to do in terms of your answers, please be clear and direct as possible. That is one of the most important things when our judges are going to be reading through the applications. They want to see clear and direct language and information when they look through your materials. As you're drafting your answers, keep in mind that the highest scoring applications are going to provide all of the important details. They're going to stay focused and clear, and they're going to tell a story. So the applications that do all of these things really are the ones that are going to score the highest. Strong applications are also going to consistently and obviously connect the needs, activities, and expected outcomes for the group and organization and the project. They're going to offer insights about how the project will help fulfill these long-term goals and visions that you have for the community. You're going to leave the readers feeling like they learned a lot about you and your community and what you're trying to accomplish. So it's really best to just try not to leave very much up to the panelist imagination. Say as much as you can. Make sure that when you write your application that you think that the judges are going to come away feeling like they know you, like they know your community, and they know what your project is going to be like they can actually see it, hear it, and experiencing it happening before it's actually happening. All right, so it's time to preview the application. There are 3 parts to the application in terms of what you'll fill out. There's an About You section, there's contact information, and there's an About the Project section. I wanted to say that this application was created as much as we could create it to be barrier-free and to not be a burden or a strain on you as someone who is completing the application. We know that a lot of grant applications out there ask the world of you. They are long, they are tedious, and it can be pretty difficult, especially for folks who don't have a lot of staff, don't have a lot of resources to be able to fill these applications out. And we try to avoid that as much as possible. So that being said, if you see that there are places where we can do better, definitely let us know via email. And if you end up filling the application out, there's also a survey at the end. You can let us know there as well, because we are trying to make it, again, as accessible and as barrier-free as possible. All right, so let's open up the application. All right, so first is I wanted to point out that you'll see at the top here that there are 4 pages. Don't let that intimidate you. There are not 4 pages of application questions. The first 2 pages are actually just resources and information to better help you navigate and prepare for filling out the application. So this first page is just about the grant itself. You'll see this top part here repeated throughout all 4 pages, just so that you don't forget that the deadline to submit the application is Friday, November 18th of 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So here we have a bit about the grants. I just gave you that overview in the presentation, but you can read again here. We have a little bit about what the program will involve and those mutual expectations that I also just talked about. More towards the bottom, the eligibility criteria. We want to let you know who are eligible entities. And then of course at the bottom here, who are ineligible entities. We really hate for you to go through the work of filling out this application just to find out at the end that you're not an eligible entity. So really make sure that, again, that you read through this part. Next, here's what you're going to need to fill out the application. And again, I've done a bit of an overview on this through the presentation, but materials that you have that state your mission, your vision, who your staff is, what your goals are, and the community that you work with and serve. And I've given some examples of where you might find this information already on hand, but of course you might have other places where this information exists that you can pull from. Certainly don't reinvent the wheel. If you have it already written up, try to pull from that as much as possible. Of course, you're going to also want a description of the specific project you're proposing for this grant. Now, we know that for some people, this is going to be relatively easy because it's a program or a service that you've been providing for a long time and can draw on maybe previous grant proposals or some kind of program outline. And also, we know that for some, this might be a brand new idea that you have and that you haven't necessarily described for anyone before. That's okay too. If you want to brainstorm, if you want to just put whatever you have together and then just think through how to make it clear and focused for the readers of the applications, that will work as well. Just try to have that material again in one place before you enter your answers. You also want to have the 2 budgets, as I mentioned, one for your overall group and organization, which is going to be more so for your reference than for Sage's reference in reviewing the application, just so that you know what your overall budget is. The more important budget to have for this grant is the one that's specific to the project that you are proposing. Again, just a recommendation to not enter your answers as you go through the application, but to do it separately and to copy and paste once you're ready to submit. And then, of course, I did talk about how there is a preview of the application questions. Here is a link where you would be able to find that. And then the resources that I mentioned to help you apply. We have our frequently asked questions, which we'll be updating as we get questions via email, some grant writing tips across different resources, and then some budget guidance, which includes a template for you to fill out for the project-specific budget that we're asking for. Again, these are the funding priorities and the scoring rubric here. So just to reiterate, the criteria that the application will be judged on are that it addresses need, that is a unique and or critical community need or needs, that it's bold, so that it offers something that's creative and or different in response to a community need, that the reach is wide or deep, that is that it touches the lives of many historically underserved LGBTQ+ older people, and or that it offers intensive support to a smaller group of LGBTQ+ older people who have been historically underserved, that there's representative leadership. So really that the project is going to engage or has a very clear plan to engage marginalized LGBTQ plus older people in meaningful, mutually beneficial, and trust-based ways. That it's engaging so that the program is offering a dynamic range of activities for community involvement. And then finally, that it's feasible so that it presents the project goals and activities that are achievable given the time and the funds that are available during the grant period. And at the bottom here, you'll be able to see how exactly the points or the scoring is going to be allotted for each of these criteria above. You'll get a maximum of 10 points. And we've outlined here what sets these different points apart. So again, just to reiterate, the highest scoring applications are really going to provide thorough details that are going to be focused. They're going to be consistently and clearly explaining how the activities address needs and lead to what you hope will happen in the end. And of course, they're going to offer insights about how the project will help fulfill long-term vision. The panelists or the judges that review the applications are ultimately going to make a recommendation on each of the applications. They're going to support the awarding of the application to receive funding. They are either going to do that or support awarding it as long as they hear more about some questions they have or see some plans to change a specific part of the application, or they're going to say they don't support awarding the application at present. And just to give you an overview of what that selection process is going to look like, first, once the application closes, our staff at SAGE is going to screen the applications for basic eligibility. We'll then pass these applications off to judges, all of whom are external to SAGE, and your application will then receive 2 written reviews from 2 different selection panel members. And this is going to happen mostly in the month of December, probably early January. They're going to meet to discuss and select finalists. And if necessary, they're going to interview finalists. This may not be a part of the process. We're going to await their judgment on that. But that might be a part of what you will be asked to do if you are a finalist. And then the selection panelists will meet one more time to actually select awardees. You can expect to hear back from SAGE about whether you have been awarded and what your feedback was on your application by early February. Okay, so the application, the first section where you're going to be answering some questions is the About You section. This is where we want to learn a little bit more about whether you are fulfilling the priorities that SAGE has set out for this grant. Now, no one's going to be excluded based on how you answer these questions, but the judges will be taking into consideration all of these factors as part of their decision making. So first, do you serve, do you work with and serve any of these prioritized groups? And you can check more than one, that might be the case for you, but you do not have to check all of them in order to qualify. Are older people making up at least 50% of the community you work with? Do they, do any of these people in these groups make up more than 50% of the leadership roles in your group or organization? Are elders a part of your leadership in your group or organization? And then finally, these questions here around your operating budget to get a sense for what kind of resources are you generally working with. And then, of course, we want to get a sense for how long have you been working in your community? Are you really established, or are you new to trying to start working with this community? None of it will be used against you, so please answer as honestly as possible when you're going through this. The second part here is your contact information. This is pretty standard across any application that you submit. First and last name, email, how we can contact you, who you are in your group or organization, and then what is the name of your group or organization? Where are you located? We're also asking for the contact information of someone else in your group or organization. We know that things change, that people change at groups and organizations for a lot of different reasons. And so we want to make sure that there's somebody else at your group or organization that we're able to communicate with and get in contact with should you not be available. Then here we want to know how many people does your group or organization currently work with. We don't need any proof of this, and if you don't necessarily have an exact number, that's okay. Your best guess is totally fine. We also want to know if your group or organization is a registered 501c3 or 4. Now, this is not a requirement for the grant, but if you are not a registered 501c3 or 4, that is, you're not a registered nonprofit, the next question that you'll see here is whether you have a fiscal sponsor. And for folks who don't know, a fiscal sponsor is somebody who serves as the administrative home of the cause or the services and programs that you're providing. Grant funds are given to the fiscal sponsor who's already established, and then those fiscal sponsors pass the money through to a non-registered group or individual, again, to support the work that you're doing. And fiscal sponsorship is often used by newly formed nonprofits that need to raise money or that are in a more trial phase of what they're doing before they can be recognized and apply for their tax exempt status. So in order to apply for the grant, you don't need to be in a 501c3 or 4, but you do need to have a fiscal sponsor if you are not. And SAGE, if you do not have a fiscal sponsor, SAGE can help you try to identify different organizations in your community to ask to see if they might be your fiscal sponsor for this project. So please reach out to us if you want to apply, but you don't necessarily have a fiscal sponsor yet. Then towards the bottom here, we are asking if your group or organization has a website, to go ahead and enter that link below so that the panelists can see what your web presence is like. And of course, if you have social media, we're going to ask that you enter those account names below here. As you can see, these are not requirements. So if you don't have that, that's okay. None of that is going to be used against you. It's just a chance for the judges to learn a little bit more about you. Okay, so this next part is really the bulk of the application. This is where we are getting to know you and the project that you're proposing in detail. So first, you want to tell us a little bit about your group or organization. What is your story? What brings you together? What is your mission? And really anything else that you want to include here that will give the judges a sense of who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what sets you apart from other groups or organizations. If you're a new group organization, it's okay to say that here, that's not going to be used against you, but it's a good time to think through what do you want your story to be if you are new to doing the work that you're trying to do. Again, as you'll see here, there's a space if you want to write. If you don't want to write, that's okay. You'll be able to tell us with a video, a voice recording, or something else. As I go through these questions, I wanted to point out that there are some word count limitations, and for the files, if you choose to go that route, there's also some size limitations. The word count limitations here, I know that some folks might think that this is a very small word count at 350 words, but we did that for two reasons. One, we want to make sure that we keep it accessible so that this application doesn't take you 3 to 10 hours to 24 hours or however much time to complete. We want it to be accessible. So we're keeping the word count to keep you focused and to keep you clear on what you want to say and to not burden you. The file size is a limitation that's placed by the system and not necessarily by us. But you'll notice towards the end of the application, there is space to upload additional files. So if something doesn't fit, maybe you break it up and upload it as separate files. But keep these word counts in mind, because if you go over the word counts, the system will not let you submit. It's gonna ask you to reduce the words. So the next question is really about what is the focus area of your proposed projects. Now, we know and understand that a lot of folks are trying to address many different things through many different approaches. That's totally okay. In fact, that would be welcome. But what we're asking you to do here is really only select up to 3 of these. So whether you're working in health and wellness, arts and creativity, financial and economic advancement, social connectedness, housing, transportation, legal aid, restorative justice, or if there's a category you're working on that we haven't even thought of, there's space for you to include it here, but only select the 3 that are most relevant and that really apply to your project. Next, the question is asking you to actually describe the specific project or the program that you're seeking funding for. What are the overall goals of the project? What community needs and or wishes is your project or program trying to fill? How do you know that those are the needs that you're trying to fill? And what do you think the project is going to be able to accomplish in order to fill those needs? Now you'll see here that this one has a much larger word count max because we want to be able to give you the space to say fully what is this project really about and how do you know or how do you think it's going to work? Next, we're asking you to talk a little bit about the types of activities that the project is going to involve, and of course, to be as specific as possible. So include activities that you're going to do as organizers and activities that the community members are also going to be a part of. So whether that's going to be planning for these activities that are happening across the year on an administrative and logistical level, and also how you're going to recruit the participants to join, and then what the participants get to do once they're a part of those activities there. You want to be as specific as possible to really demonstrate what is the meat, what is the real content of the project itself, where folks actually get to be involved and get to do things. Next, we want to get a sense for how your group or organization is actually going to make the activities in the project happen. Who's going to be responsible for coordinating and organizing the work? What are the resources that you're going to need and use? What are the plans that you're going to put in place to make sure that you see the project through? And this is really important for that one criteria that I mentioned earlier, around feasibility. The judges are really going to be reading to see, can this project actually be done within the time and resources that you are saying you have access to? So you want to be as clear about how that's going to happen as possible in order to score really well. And then we're asking you to talk a little bit about the community that you want to work with. What's your history working with that community? And if you are new to working with the community that you're proposing in the project, how do you intend to build meaningful trust-based relationships? What experience and skills do you have in the past that shows to the judges that you can actually do this work in a way that is respectful, that is meaningful, and that's actually going to engage this community in a way that means that they have real power as part of the project. Next, we have a question about how many people you hope this specific project is going to reach. Be as honest as you can. We are not going to tell the judges to make their ratings and score these applications based on who's going to reach the most people. Impact can be reaching a lot of people, and impact can also be reaching 5 people that you talk to once a week, that you provide a lot of services and support for, and that's really intensive. So there's no need to inflate this answer. Be as honest as possible about who you're going to reach, and make sure that there is a connection between what you're saying is going to be in the activities, and then also how many people are going to be reached. Finally, this last question is really more information for us at Sage to do some planning for the grant program. As I mentioned early on, this is not just a project that is distributing funds. This is a project about learning, about networking, about providing support and assistance to all of those organizations that are grantees that are working at a local level but don't necessarily have resources. So we want to know a bit more about what are the topics you think you and your community definitely would like training and support with. And so that might be things like budgeting and accounting or grant writing, community outreach, strategic planning, any number of these things. And of course, if there's something else that you have in mind, there's space for you to put that here too, or you might not know. And that's okay too. You can say that you don't know yet, and maybe we'll find out together if you're granted an award. Finally, we have some additional materials that you're able to upload. One of them is a requirement. So you want to upload an outline of your project-specific budget. Again, there is a link to a template for you to use if you need it, which I'll get into in just a second. And then if you have other materials or media that you want to share to help the judges better understand your group or organization, the community you work with, the project that you're proposing, you have some space to upload that here as well. So I want to really quickly jump into what the template looks like for the budget. You are by no means required to use this budget. This is more so for folks who don't have a template already and who need a little bit of guidance around putting together a project budget. So you want to make sure that you complete all the gray areas and know that the information that you enter here should be specific to this project and not to your overall organization. Now, I wanted to say that the total that you enter that you are needing for the project or that you enter, for any specific thing might be over $5,000. That's okay. Most projects take more than $5,000. But it's important to remember that this grant only funds up to $5,000. So if you, put in here that your project is going to cost $4,500, for example, we're not going to give you the $5,000. We're going to give you $4,500. But if you put that your project is going to cost a total of $15,000, we're not going to give you $15,000. We're going to give you the $5,000. So just be clear that it is up to $5,000. So here's some space just for some more information about who you are, how much in total you're asking for, your name, your role, your email, and your phone contact. And here you have space to say whether there is a separate person we should be contacting if we have questions about the budget. If you don't have someone, that's okay. You can just leave that blank. Here are the different line items for the budget. So we have salary and fringe benefits, contractual or consulting services, any travel, supplies and materials that you might need, and of course, anything else that might not be included in any of those costs. And then indirect costs here towards the very end is the last thing. You want to make sure to read through each of the instructions below the line items, because that'll tell you how you want to fill out the right side of the budget here. So part of this is including a detailed description of how the funds are going to be used in this gray box here. And then entering the requested amount for this specific line item in the blue boxes up here. Mostly what this description will give you is what we mean by any of those line items. So what does salary and fringe benefits include? What does contractual or consulting services include? What does travel include? So you have a sense of where to categorize your different line items. There may be more than one item that fits within each of these categories, and you want to make sure that you outline each of those specific parts. So if you have salary for 5 people, you want to make sure you say all those 5 people, how much of the salary you're going to be requesting, or that goes into their work for that specific project that you're proposing for the Equity Innovation Lab grant. So make sure you read through carefully all of these if you're using the budget template. Again, you're not required. If you already have a project budget somewhere, that's okay to include as well. We're happy to take that. Just make sure that it is clear and that it has information that's similar to what's included in this general budget that you see here. Next, I wanted to go ahead and show you the frequently asked questions and walk through those a bit as the last part of the tutorial. We are going to be updating these frequently asked questions as we receive questions in our inbox and from you. So when you ask a question, know that it's not just helpful to you, but helpful to anybody who's trying to apply, because we populate this FAQ with all the questions that we get. So here are the few that we've gotten so far. One of them is about whether organizations outside of the United States are eligible to apply. Only groups and organizations that are based out of the United States, that does include those that are in U.S. territories like Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, are eligible to apply. If you are working outside of the country, even if it's in North America, unfortunately, in this round, you are not able to apply. There's been a question about whether you have to be working in multiple geographic areas in order to be considered for the grant or in order to score highly. You do not. You can work in a very hyper local community and definitely be eligible to apply. What we mean when we say we want geographic diversity is when the judges are making their selections, we don't want 6 grantees to come from only the West Coast or only California. We want to make sure that there's some representation from different parts of the country. But you do not have to be working in different parts of the country or even in different parts of your state or city. It can be very hyperlocal. We've been asked if the application is offered in any other languages outside of English. At the moment, it is not offered in other languages. However, if you or another group or organization you know is not able to apply because of this, please reach out with who you are, where you are, and the language you need, so that we can track and document the need for this and make sure that we allot the right resources for the next grant around to have the application available in other languages. We've had a couple of questions about whether you can apply for a grant to support one individual, or whether you as an individual can apply for grants to support yourself. Unfortunately, no. Applicants must be proposing projects that are working for many people in the community. By many people, though, we don't mean that it has to be at least 50 or something like that. We are meaning at least a group of 5 or more people that are being supported through the proposed project, but it can't be for individuals. It can't be just for one person, although we recognize that there is a need for that. This specific grant is not for that. We've had some questions about the budget itself for qualifying for the grant. So some folks have said, well, I'm barely above the $50,000 operational budget per year. Can you still apply? You can still apply if your budget is no more than $75,000. But we want to reiterate that the priority is given to those organizations that have an annual operating budget of less than $50,000. And during this pilot phase, we're not going to even be considering organizations with budgets that are greater than $75,000. But if your operational budget is $51,000, for example, please apply so that you can be considered for this grant. We've also had some questions about, larger organizations that have very big operational budgets, but that want to apply for the funding for one of their smaller programs, where their specific budget for that smaller program is less than $50,000. can they still apply? The answer to that is no, because this grant is meant to center and support under-resourced groups and organizations. However, we're going to accept applicants from a group of participants that maybe are supported by an organization that's big, but a few of the people that you serve have split off, formed their own group, and decided they wanted to try something, but they don't have a fiscal sponsor and they want you to serve as a fiscal sponsor because you're a large organization. We would funnel through the grants in that case, but not for you as a large entity. There's been questions about whether to be eligible, you have to work with all of the prioritized groups, that is BIPOC, TGNC, and rural individuals. The answer is no, your group doesn't have to work with all of these groups, but priority is going to be given to those groups and organizations that work with LGBTQ plus older people that are at the intersection of 2 or more of these groups. And certainly if you're not working with any of these groups, your application will not be prioritized. There's been questions about whether intergenerational projects will be funded or will be considered. Yes, absolutely. Intergenerational projects are welcome, but it's really important in the application to say how older people are going to be a critical part of leadership and how they're going to have decision-making power and how they're going to be meaningfully engaged in the project. Similarly, for folks who haven't necessarily worked with older people in the past, but they want to start a new project or a program with older people, you can definitely apply. Again, understand that the priority is given to groups and organizations that have a history of being led by older people and that are working with older people. But if you don't have this history, you just need to make sure that you're clear and convincing for how you have plans to meaningfully and respectfully engage with and recruit older people to lead and to be involved in the proposed project. Same goes for a new idea for a project, but you haven't worked with the community before. We welcome new projects and groups. Again, priority is given to those who have a history of working with their communities. But if you can make a very clear and convincing case about how you're going to meaningfully do it and what experience and skills you bring in order to see that through, you will absolutely be considered. Finally, around the question of fiscal sponsorship, if you don't have it, can you still apply? Yes, you're welcome to apply if you don't have a fiscal sponsor identified, but you will ultimately be responsible for identifying that fiscal sponsor before you submit the application. Unfortunately, as the funder, Sage cannot serve as the fiscal sponsor, but we are happy to work with you to try to identify some potential candidates for fiscal sponsors in your community. Our network is pretty wide, and so we can help direct you to some places where you might be able to find a fiscal sponsor. And then there's a question a few times we've had now about whether a for-profit business who's working with marginalized LGBTQ plus older people can apply. The answer is no. This is specifically for nonprofits and for those informal groups who are not trying to make a profit. So for-profit businesses are ineligible for this grant. Okay, so with that, I think that we have reached the end of what I have ready to show, but I believe we have one question that is specific to whether this is for direct programming or whether you could propose something related to research or advocacy. Absolutely, folks who are trying to do something that is related to research, or for example, to conduct a needs assessment, or to try to get their constituents and people in their community organized to advocate for something, you're welcome to apply. Again, the most important part is that you have a plan for how there will be ongoing activities, not just a one-time initiative, but something that's happening throughout the year for people to engage in. And also to make sure that all of the prioritized groups, BIPOC, TGNC, NB, and then rural, older LGBTQ plus folks are meaningfully engaged in this research or advocacy effort or needs assessment. to help you plan for maybe what another project will be in the future. But they have to be meaningfully engaged, and there have to be some consistent and ongoing activities that are a part of the project. There's another question here that looks like it's about whether there need to be ongoing activities for the full 12 months or whether a 6-month program would be able to qualify. You can apply and submit for a program that is only going to involve activities for 6 months. However, you will be expected as a grantee to continue engaging with the other grantees and engaging in the learning and technical assistance part of the program beyond those 6 months. So you'd have to have a way of showing how you're going to maintain involvement with the grant program itself, and also how you're going to contribute learnings to the grant program past the 6-month program or perhaps 4-month program that you're proposing. That being said, priority will be given to those projects that are engaging in activities for a longer time. So if a judge is looking at 2 applications, one of them is proposing a 4-month program and one of them is proposing a 12-month program, the 12-month program is likely to take precedent because they can have a longer term impact and involvement with the community itself, as opposed to just with you as the grantee. Thank you for these questions. They're very helpful, and I'm sure other people have the same questions. Let's see. Any other questions before we wrap up? We're close to the end here. All right, so let me quickly just share a wrap up. If you are filling out the application, please, please, please fill out the post-application survey. We really want to improve the application process. And there's no way to do that unless we get feedback from you about what worked, what didn't, what was really difficult and inaccessible, and what made it, you know, a joy to apply to. So please, please, please complete the post-application survey. And know that your survey is not going to be connected to your name or your grant application in any way. It's completely separate and completely anonymized. And with that, if you have more questions, definitely email us at equityinnovation@sageusa.org. We are on the line. We're ready to answer those questions and to help you get through this application. But more than anything else, we're so thrilled to read these applications, to learn about what you're doing, and to get this initiative off the ground, and to see all of the ways that it can make a difference in transferring that power and those resources to the folks who already know best. And with that, I will say thank you so much for attending this, this tutorial or watching it online, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.